I never thought the sound of my own doorbell would make my heart stop. But on that gray November morning in Portland, when I heard that familiar chime echo through the house Robert and I bought 30 years ago, something inside me knew. The way the mail carrier lingered on my porch, the way he looked at me with those apologetic eyes, the thick manila envelope he held like it contained something poisonous. "Mrs. Hayes, I need you to sign for this." My hands trembled as I took the pen. The envelope felt heavy, official. I closed the door and stood in my entryway, the same spot where I'd welcomed David home from the hospital as a newborn, where Robert had kissed me goodbye before his heart attack took him 6 years ago, where I'd hugged my son and his new wife Vanessa 5 years back when I'd said, "Stay as long as you need. Family helps family." I ripped open the envelope. The words swam before my eyes. Summons. Civil Court. Plaintiff, David Hayes and Vanessa Hayes. Defendant, Margaret Hayes. Cause of action, illegal eviction, breach of oral contract, emotional distress. My own son was suing me. I sank onto the bottom step of the staircase, the papers scattering around me like autumn leaves. The house suddenly felt enormous and empty, even though 3 people lived here. Especially because 3 people lived here. Let me take you back, because you need to understand how I ended up being sued for trying to reclaim my own life, my own home. You need to know how love can make you blind, how kindness can be mistaken for weakness, and how the people who should protect you can become the ones who destroy you. It started innocently enough. David called me in the spring of 2019, his voice tight with stress. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something. Can Vanessa and I come over for dinner?" I remember feeling excited. My boy needed me. After Robert died, David had been my anchor, my reason to keep going. He'd visit every week, call every few days. Then he met Vanessa at some tech networking event, and within 4 months, they were married at the courthouse. I'll admit, it stung that I wasn't invited to be there, but Vanessa explained they wanted something intimate, just the 2 of them. I understood, or I tried to. That dinner, I made David's favorite, pot roast with roasted carrots and garlic mashed potatoes. Vanessa picked at her food, pushing the carrots around her plate with a look of distaste that she didn't bother hiding. She was beautiful in that sharp, angular way, with hair dyed an unnatural shade of platinum and nails so long I wondered how she functioned. 29 years old and everything about her screamed high maintenance. "So, what did you want to talk about?" I asked, pouring everyone more wine. David glanced at Vanessa. She gave him a slight nod, like she was granting permission. "Mom, we're in a tight spot financially. The startup I was working for went under, and I've been job hunting for 2 months with no luck. Our lease is up next week, and with my unemployment barely covering anything." He trailed off, looking miserable. My mother's heart broke. "Oh, honey. I'm so sorry. What can I do to help?" Vanessa leaned forward, her green eyes locking onto mine. "Margaret, we were wondering if we could stay here, just temporarily. Maybe 2 or 3 months, just until David finds something and we get back on our feet." I didn't hesitate. "Of course. This house is too big for just me anyway. You can have the entire upstairs. I'll stay down here in the master bedroom." The relief on David's face made it all worth it. He came around the table and hugged me tight. "Thank you, Mom. I promise we won't be a burden. We'll help with groceries, utilities, everything. And it's just for a little while." Vanessa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're a lifesaver, Margaret." They moved in that weekend. I helped carry boxes, cleared out the guest room and the room that had been David's childhood bedroom. I washed all the linens, put fresh flowers in vases, stocked the upstairs bathroom with new towels. I wanted them to feel welcome, to feel at home. 2 months became 4. 4 became 8. David's job search seemed to stall. Every week he'd tell me about interviews that went nowhere, positions that were filled, opportunities that fell through. Vanessa didn't work at all. When I gently asked about her job search, she'd wave her hand dismissively. "I'm focusing on supporting David right now. Job hunting is so stressful for him. He needs me to be present, you know? Besides, I have some health issues, chronic fatigue." My doctor says stress makes it worse. I nodded, sympathetic. I didn't know then that Vanessa's health issues would become the excuse for everything. Why she couldn't help with housework. Why she couldn't cook dinner. Why she slept until noon every day while I tiptoed around my own home trying not to disturb her. By the first year, I was paying for everything. The mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, the internet they used constantly. David's unemployment had run out, and he'd started doing occasional gig work, driving for rideshare apps maybe 10 hours a week. Vanessa contributed nothing. When I mentioned maybe they could help with the grocery bill, just to ease things a bit on my fixed retirement income, Vanessa's face turned to stone. We're doing the best we can, Margaret. David is working himself to exhaustion. I can't believe you'd add to his stress by asking for money when we're already struggling. David looked pained. Mom, can you just give us a little more time? So I gave them time, and money, and space, and my dignity, bit by bit, month by month. Year 2 was when things shifted. Vanessa started redecorating. She'd come home with shopping bags from Home Goods and Target, new throw pillows for the living room, new curtains for the dining room, a new coffee maker because mine was ancient and embarrassing. Ah, Vanessa, honey, I appreciate the thought, but I like my curtains, I said gently, watching her rip down the cream-colored panels I'd chosen with Robert 15 years ago. Margaret, they're hideous. They make the whole house look dated. Trust me, I have an eye for design. She didn't look at me as she spoke, already hanging her selection, some gauzy gray things that blocked out all the light. I stood there, holding my old curtains, feeling like a stranger in my own home. But I told myself it was temporary. They'd leave soon. I could change everything back. David stopped looking for work entirely by year 3. I'd find him on the couch in the middle of the day, playing video games, while I came home from volunteering at the library. I'd worked as a teacher for 33 years, and retirement was supposed to be my time to finally relax, to travel, to live. Instead, I was supporting 2 able-bodied adults who treated me like an ATM machine with housekeeping services. The dynamic had shifted so gradually that I hadn't noticed when it happened. Vanessa no longer asked for things, she told me. Margaret, we need more almond milk. And get the organic kind this time. The regular one upsets my stomach. Margaret, can you keep it down in the mornings? Some of us need our sleep. Margaret, we're having friends over Saturday, so maybe you could stay in your room or go out somewhere? My own home had become a place where I needed permission to exist. The worst part? The isolation. My friends from the school where I taught started calling less. I'd had to cancel so many lunch dates, so many book club meetings, because I needed to be home to let in the cable guy Vanessa had called, or because I needed to cook dinner, or because Vanessa had one of her episodes and David needed me there. Gradually, the invitations stopped coming. My sister Linda in Seattle would call and ask when I was coming to visit, and I'd make excuses. How could I leave? Who would take care of things here? I didn't realize I'd been trained, conditioned. Vanessa was a master. I see that now. She'd isolated me from my support system, made me responsible for their well-being, convinced me that their failures were somehow my fault. If David couldn't find work, it was because the stress of his living situation was too much. If Vanessa was tired and irritable, it was because I was making too much noise or not buying the right groceries or existing too loudly in my own space. Year 4, David stopped calling me Mom. He'd address me by my first name, Margaret, like I was some landlord he barely knew. Vanessa had completely taken over the main floor. Her clothes were draped over my furniture. Her makeup covered the bathroom counter. Her friends would come over, and they'd sprawl across my living room, drinking wine I'd bought, laughing at jokes I wasn't included in, while I retreated to my bedroom like I was the guest. I remember one night, I came out in my bathrobe to get a glass of water around 10 o'clock. Vanessa and 3 of her friends were there, and when I walked into the kitchen, the conversation stopped. They all stared at me. "Can we help you with something?" Vanessa asked, her tone icy. "I just need some water. This is my kitchen," one of her friends giggled. Vanessa smiled, sharp as a knife. "Margaret, we're having a private conversation. Could you maybe take your water and go?" I filled my glass with shaking hands and left. Behind me, I heard them burst into laughter. I lay in my bed, in the dark, listening to them trash my home, my life, my everything, and I cried silently into my pillow. That was the moment something cracked inside me. Or maybe it was the moment something finally hardened. By year 5, I was broke. My retirement savings were dwindling. I'd taken out a small loan against the house just to cover property taxes. I was eating less, so there would be enough food for David and Vanessa. I'd stopped buying myself new clothes, stopped going to the hairdresser, stopped doing anything that cost money. My friends didn't recognize me anymore when they occasionally ran into me at the grocery store. I'd aged 10 years in 5. Then came Thanksgiving of this year. I'd spent 2 days cooking a traditional meal from scratch. Turkey, stuffing, 3 kinds of pie. I'd invited Linda and her husband Jerry, thinking maybe having family around would help. Maybe David would remember who I was, who we were. Vanessa invited her mother and brother without asking me. They showed up an hour before Linda, loud and entitled, tracking mud through my house. Vanessa's mother, Patricia, looked around my home with barely concealed disgust. "So this is the place," she said, her voice dripping with judgment. Vanessa told me all about the situation. I tried to smile. "Welcome, Patricia. I'm so glad you could join us." She looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Dinner was a nightmare. Linda and Jerry kept exchanging concerned glances as Vanessa's family dominated the conversation, talking over me, ignoring me, treating me like hired help. When I brought out the turkey, Vanessa wrinkled her nose. "Is this organic?" "Margaret, you know I have sensitivities." "It's a turkey, Vanessa. The same kind we've had every year." "Ugh, I can't eat this. Did you make anything else?" She turned to her mother. "See what I deal with?" She doesn't listen. Patricia patted her daughter's hand sympathetically, shooting me a look of pure contempt. David said nothing. He wouldn't even look at me. Linda spoke up, her voice tight. "Margaret worked for 2 days on this meal. Maybe a little gratitude would be appropriate?" Vanessa's brother, Kyle, laughed. "Who are you, the manners police? I'm her sister, and I'm watching you people treat her like garbage in her own home." The table went silent. Vanessa stood up, her chair scraping loudly. "I don't have to sit here and be attacked. David, we're leaving." David stood up automatically, like a puppet on strings. He started to follow her upstairs. Something inside me snapped. 5 years of swallowing my words, my feelings, my self-respect, all of it came rushing up like bile. "No." Everyone turned to stare at me. I stood up, my hands flat on the table. "No. You don't get to ruin this meal, disrespect me in my home, and then storm off like the victim. I'm done, Vanessa. I'm done with all of this." Her eyes went wide, then narrow. "Excuse me? I want you and David to move out. Find your own place. I've supported you both for 5 years and I can't do it anymore. I won't do it anymore." David's face went pale. "Mom, you can't be serious. We have nowhere to go. That's not my problem anymore. I gave you a few months. I gave you 5 years. I gave you everything. And you've given me nothing but disrespect and financial ruin. You're both adults. Figure it out." Vanessa's shock turned to rage. "After everything we've done for you, keeping you company, staying in this depressing house, putting up with your constant hovering and criticism?" I almost laughed. Almost. "What you've done for me. Vanessa, you've destroyed my life. Both of you. I want you out by the end of the month." Patricia stood up, indignant. "You can't just throw them out on the street. There are laws against that. This is my house. I can ask anyone to leave. We'll see about that," Vanessa hissed. Then she grabbed David's arm and pulled him upstairs. Her mother and brother followed, shooting me venomous looks. I heard doors slamming, angry voices. Linda came around the table and hugged me tight. "It's about time," she whispered. "I've been waiting 5 years for you to wake up." I cried then. Great. Heaving sobs of relief and grief and exhaustion. Jerry quietly packed up food for Linda and himself, and they left, Linda promising to call me the next day. I thought the hard part was over. I thought I'd finally taken control of my life back. I had no idea the nightmare was just beginning. David and Vanessa didn't speak to me for 3 days. They stayed upstairs, ordering delivery food on credit cards I didn't know they had. On the fourth day, David came down and handed me a letter from an attorney. "You shouldn't have done this, Margaret," he said quietly. "Not, Mom." Margaret. Like I was nothing to him. The letter informed me that I was illegally evicting tenants who had established residency. It demanded I cease and desist all eviction efforts or face legal action. It claimed that I had entered into an oral contract with David and Vanessa, promising them indefinite housing in exchange for caregiving services and companionship after Robert's death. That was a lie. A complete, absolute lie. But there it was, in legal language, making me sound like the villain. David, this isn't true. None of this is true. I never promised you could stay forever, and you certainly never provided me any care or companionship. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That's not how Vanessa remembers it. I'm your mother. How can you do this to me? Finally, he looked at me, and what I saw in his face chilled me to the bone. Nothing. No love, no guilt, no recognition, just cold indifference. You brought this on yourself, Margaret. You should have just let us stay. That was 3 weeks ago. I hired a lawyer I couldn't afford with money I didn't have, borrowing from Linda because my accounts were empty. My attorney, a kind woman named Rachel Morgan, reviewed everything and assured me I had a strong case. Mrs. Hayes, you have every right to ask them to leave. This is clearly a frivolous lawsuit designed to intimidate you. Don't worry. But I did worry. I worried every second of every day. Vanessa moved through my house like she owned it, smiling smugly whenever she passed me. David avoided me entirely. I heard them laughing sometimes, upstairs in what used to be his childhood bedroom, and I wondered who my son had become. Or maybe I wondered if I'd ever really known him at all. The court date arrived faster than I expected. December 10th. I dressed carefully that morning in my best dress, the navy blue one I'd worn to Robert's funeral. My hands shook as I applied lipstick. Linda had driven down from Seattle to be there with me. "You're going to be fine," she kept saying. "The judge will see right through this." But as I walked into that courthouse in downtown Portland, my stomach churned with dread. What if the judge believed them? What if I lost my house? What if 5 years of sacrifice ended with me losing everything? The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and cold. David and Vanessa sat at the plaintiff's table with their attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. They'd dressed up for this. David wore a shirt and tie I'd bought him 3 Christmases ago. Vanessa had on a conservative dress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She looked innocent, vulnerable. I sat at the defendant's table with Rachel, feeling ancient and defeated. The bailiff called the court to order. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Marcus Chen." The judge entered, a serious-looking Asian-American man in his 50s with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He sat, reviewed the file in front of him, and looked up. His gaze swept the courtroom, landed on me, moved to David and Vanessa, then snapped back to Vanessa. His expression changed, just slightly, a tightening around his eyes, a straightening of his posture. "Ms. Vanessa Hayes?" he said slowly. Vanessa smiled, that sweet, innocent smile she used when she wanted something. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Chen stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked directly at me and I saw something in his face I couldn't quite read. Recognition? Shock? Disbelief? He pointed at Vanessa, his hand steady but his voice carrying an edge that made everyone in the courtroom freeze. "Wait, you're suing her?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. The silence was absolute, suffocating. Vanessa's smile faltered. David looked confused. Their attorney shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Judge Chen's eyes never left Vanessa's face, and in them I saw something that made my heart start racing with a feeling I hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. "Your Honor, I don't understand." Vanessa started, her voice uncertain for the first time since I'd known her. "Oh, I think you understand perfectly, Ms. Hayes." The judge's voice was cold as winter rain. "I think you understand better than anyone in this room." He opened another file on his desk, one that hadn't been there before. "Bailiff, I'm going to need to see some additional identification from the plaintiff. And someone call the district attorney's office. I believe they've been looking for Ms. Hayes for quite some time. The world tilted. Everything I thought I knew, everything I'd been prepared for, shattered in that moment. Vanessa's face went white as paper, and I realized that whatever was about to happen, nothing would ever be the same again. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Vanessa's attorney jumped to his feet, objecting loudly. David looked between his wife and the judge, confusion spreading across his face like spilled ink. But I couldn't look away from Vanessa. For the first time since I'd met her, the mask had slipped. The confident, controlling woman who'd terrorized me for 5 years was gone. In her place sat someone cornered, desperate, calculating her next move. "Your Honor, I think there's been some mistake," Vanessa said, her voice shaking just slightly. But her eyes were sharp, alert, searching for an escape route. Judge Chen leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Hayes, are you also known as Vanessa Cordero? Vanessa Martin? Victoria Hansen?" The names hung in the air like accusations. David turned to stare at his wife, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly. "I legally changed my name when I got married," Vanessa said carefully. "That's not a crime, Your Honor." "No, it's not." Judge Chen's voice was measured, controlled. "But fraud is. Identity theft is. Elder exploitation is. Should I continue?" My heart hammered against my ribs. Elder exploitation. The words didn't make sense at first, then slowly, horribly, they began to click into place. Rachel leaned toward me, whispering urgently, "Did you know about any of this?" I shook my head, unable to speak. On the other side of the room, David had gone pale as death. "Vanessa, what is he talking about?" She ignored him, her attention fixed on the judge. "Your Honor, I came here today as a plaintiff in a housing dispute. Whatever you think you know about me has nothing to do with this case." "On the contrary, Ms. Hayes, it has everything to do with this case." Judge Chen opened the file in front of him. 3 years ago in King County, Washington, a woman named Vanessa Cordero moved in with a 72-year-old widower named Frank Morrison. She told him she was his late daughter's college roommate, down on her luck, needing just a few months to get back on her feet. Does this sound familiar? I felt Linda grab my hand, squeezing tight. My entire body had gone numb. 18 months later, Mr. Morrison tried to evict Ms. Cordero and her boyfriend. She sued him, claiming he'd promised her the house, that she'd been caring for him, that he was mentally incompetent. The case was eventually dismissed, but by then, Mr. Morrison's savings were depleted from legal fees. He died 6 months later. Heart attack. The stress, according to his sister, killed him. "Your Honor, this is completely inappropriate," Vanessa's attorney interjected. "My client isn't on trial here. She's the plaintiff, and these accusations are..." "Before that," Judge Chen continued, his voice rising slightly, "there was a Mrs. Patricia Lennox in Spokane. And before that, a Mr. and Mrs. Chen in Tacoma." He paused, letting that sink in. "Yes, Chen. My parents." The courtroom went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. My mind reeled, trying to process what I was hearing. Judge Chen's parents. Vanessa had done this to Judge Chen's own parents. 7 years ago, Vanessa Martin, as she called herself then, befriended my mother at a grocery store. Said she was new to town, had just gotten divorced, was struggling. My mother, generous to a fault, invited her to church, to dinner. Within 2 months, Vanessa and her then-boyfriend had moved into my parents' home. Within 6 months, they'd manipulated their way into having their names added to my parents' bank accounts, just for emergencies. Within a year, they'd stolen nearly $80,000. David made a sound like he'd been punched. I watched him, this stranger who used to be my son, and saw the moment everything clicked into place for him, the moment he realized what he'd married, what he'd become a part of. "We pressed charges," Judge Chen continued, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "But Vanessa disappeared before she could be arrested. New name, new city, new victim. The King County case popped up on our radar, but by the time we connected the dots, she'd vanished again. And now, here you are, Ms. Hayes, in my courtroom, Suing your own mother-in-law, a 60-year-old widow, using the exact same playbook you've used on at least 4 other families that we know of. Vanessa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I want a different judge. This is clearly biased. He has a personal vendetta. Sit down, Ms. Hayes. Judge Chen's voice cracked like a whip. Bailiff, please make sure Ms. Hayes doesn't leave this courtroom. I'm issuing a bench warrant right now for her arrest on the outstanding charges from King County, and I'm requesting that the district attorney investigate this current situation for potential fraud and elder abuse. 2 bailiffs moved toward Vanessa. She looked at David, and for just a second I saw calculation in her eyes. She was going to try to use him, to manipulate him one more time. David, baby, you have to help me. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Tell them about your mother, how she treated us, how she— No. David's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through her words like a knife. No, I'm not doing this anymore. He stood up, swaying slightly, and turned to look at me. Really look at me. For the first time in years, what I saw in his face broke my heart all over again. Horror, shame, realization, grief. Mom, he said, and his voice cracked on the word. Oh God, Mom, what have I done? I couldn't speak, couldn't move. 5 years of pain, of humiliation, of watching my son transform into someone I didn't recognize, all of it came crashing down on me at once. Vanessa jerked away from the bailiff, reaching for her arm. Don't touch me. You can't do this. David, are you just going to stand there? Do something. But David had already turned away from her. He was walking toward me, tears streaming down his face. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Mr. Hayes, Rachel said gently but firmly, standing up to create a barrier between David and me. Perhaps now isn't the time. The bailiffs had Vanessa in handcuffs. She was screaming now, all pretense of innocence gone, her true self finally exposed. This is insane. You can't arrest me for trying to get what I deserve. That old woman had everything handed to her, lived in that huge house all alone while people like me have to struggle. While people like you prey on vulnerable, grieving people, Judge Chen said coldly. While you exploit kindness and twist family bonds into weapons, take her into custody. As they led Vanessa toward the door, she locked eyes with me one last time. The hatred in her gaze was pure, undiluted venom. You think you've won? You haven't won anything. You're still a pathetic, lonely old woman who couldn't even keep her own son's love. 5 years, Margaret. I owned you for 5 years, and you let me. You were so easy. The words were designed to hurt, to leave one last wound. And they did. Because part of what she said was true. I had let it happen. I'd been so desperate not to lose David, so afraid of being alone, that I'd allowed myself to be destroyed piece by piece. The door closed behind her, and the courtroom seemed to exhale collectively. Judge Chen looked at me, and in his eyes I saw understanding, sympathy, and a deep, weary sadness. Mrs. Hayes, I'm dismissing this case with prejudice. The plaintiff's claims are clearly fraudulent, and you are under no obligation to provide housing to your son or his wife any longer. In fact, I'm issuing an emergency protective order, Ms. Vanessa Hayes is not to contact you or come within 500 feet of your property. He paused. I'm deeply sorry for what you've endured. My parents never fully recovered from what she did to them, but you're free now. This ends today. Free. The word sounded foreign, impossible. I'd forgotten what freedom felt like. Rachel was talking to me, explaining next steps, legal procedures, but I barely heard her. Linda had her arms around me, holding me up because my legs had stopped working properly. David stood a few feet away, his attorney whispering urgently in his ear, but he wasn't listening either. He just stared at me with those haunted eyes. As we left the courtroom, reporters were already gathering in the hallway. Somehow word had spread about Vanessa's arrest. Questions flew at us from all directions, cameras flashing. Mrs. Hayes, how does it feel knowing your daughter-in-law was wanted for fraud? Did you suspect something was wrong? Mr. Hayes, did you know about your wife's criminal history? Linda and Rachel formed a protective barrier, guiding me through the crowd. Behind us, I heard David's voice, cracking with emotion as he tried to respond to the reporters. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I've destroyed my mother's life, and I didn't even know why. We made it outside into the cold December air. The sky was gray, threatening rain, perfectly matching the storm inside me. Linda led me to her car, while Rachel promised to call me later to discuss the next steps. "Let's get you home," Linda said softly. Home. That house that hadn't felt like home in 5 years. That place where I'd been erased, bit by bit, until I was barely a ghost in my own life. As we drove through Portland streets, decorated with Christmas lights and holiday cheer, I felt nothing. Not relief, not joy, not even satisfaction, just a vast, echoing emptiness where my life used to be. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Special Agent Sarah DeMarco with the FBI. We'd like to speak with you about Vanessa Hayes and her activities. There may be federal charges. Please call me at your earliest convenience." The FBI. This was bigger than I'd imagined. Bigger than one courtroom, one judge, one family destroyed. How many others had there been? How many other lonely widows, grieving parents, vulnerable people had Vanessa targeted? Another text came through, this time from David. "Mom, please. I need to talk to you. I need to explain. I need to make this right." I stared at those words until they blurred. Make it right. As if that were possible. As if 5 years of my life, my savings, my dignity, my sense of self could just be given back with an apology and some tears. Linda glanced over at me. "You don't have to respond to him right now. Or ever, honestly. You don't owe him anything, Maggie. But he was still my son. Despite everything. Despite the stranger he'd become. Despite the fact that he'd chosen Vanessa over me again and again. Somewhere inside that broken man was the little boy I'd raised. The child I'd loved more than my own life. And that was the cruelest part of all. Because even now, even after everything, I still loved him. And I hated myself for it. When we pulled up to my house, not theirs anymore, I saw that someone had already been there. The upstairs windows were open, and I could see movement inside. My heart seized with panic. "Wait here," Linda said, already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police." But before she could dial, the front door opened. David stepped out onto the porch, alone. He'd beaten us here. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "I'm packing our stuff," he called out. "I'll be gone by tonight. I needed to get it done. I needed to do at least this one thing right." I got out of the car slowly. Linda followed, protective and wary. We walked up to the porch together. David wouldn't look at me directly. He kept his eyes on the ground. I found some things. In Vanessa's stuff. Documents. ID cards with different names. A notebook where she'd written down information about you. Your routines, your finances, your social security number. It was all planned, Mom. From the very beginning, before we even got married, she'd researched you, targeted you. The words landed like physical blows. "Did you know?" "No." He finally looked up, and the anguish in his face was real. "I swear to God, I didn't know. I thought she loved me. I thought we were struggling together, that you were helping us get back on our feet. I was so stupid, so blind. She'd tell me things, that you'd said mean things to her when I wasn't around, that you were trying to turn me against her, that you were getting forgetful and confused. She made me doubt you, doubt my own perceptions. By the end, I didn't know what was real anymore." "That's called gaslighting," Linda said coldly. "And you let her do it to your mother for 5 years. David flinched like she'd struck him. I know, and I'll never forgive myself. She'd cry and tell me stories about her childhood, about her abusive parents, about how she'd never felt safe anywhere until she met me. She made me feel like I was rescuing her. But all along, she was the predator, and I was just. I was her tool. She used me to get to you." I wanted to scream at him, to rage, to ask him how he could have been so weak, so blind, so willing to abandon his own mother. But looking at him now, broken and lost, I realized Vanessa had victimized him too, differently than she'd victimized me, but no less completely. "The FBI wants to talk to me," I said quietly. "They're building a case against her. They'll probably want to talk to you too." He nodded. I'll tell them everything, whatever they need. And Mom, the house. I found papers in her things. She'd forged your signature on a deed transfer. She was planning to try to claim you'd given me the house, that you were incompetent. She was going to have you declared unfit and put in a home. The air left my lungs. A nursing home. She'd been planning to have me institutionalized so she could steal my house. The house Robert and I had built our entire life in. Linda put her arm around me. That's enough for today, David. Finish packing and leave the key on the kitchen counter. Don't contact Margaret again unless she reaches out to you first. She needs space, and you need to figure out how you're going to live with what you've done. David nodded miserably. I'm staying at a motel on Powell Boulevard. If you need me, if you want to talk, I'll be there. But I understand if you never want to see me again. I understand if you hate me. Did I hate him? I honestly didn't know. I felt too many things at once. A churning mass of emotions that had no names. Just go, I whispered. Please, just go. He went back inside. Linda and I sat in her car, waiting, watching as David carried boxes and trash bags out to his old sedan. Everything they'd accumulated in 5 years fit in one trip. They'd traveled light, these predators, easy to move on to the next victim. When he was done, David walked over to Linda's car. He laid something on the hood, my house key, and a folded piece of paper. Then he got in his car and drove away without looking back. I retrieved the paper. Inside, in David's messy handwriting, I know sorry isn't enough. It will never be enough. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become someone who deserves to be your son again. Even if you never forgive me. Even if I never forgive myself. I love you, Mom. I never stopped. Even when I forgot how to show it. D. The tears finally came then. Not gentle tears, but harsh, racking sobs that shook my entire body. Linda held me while I cried in her car outside my own house, crying for everything I'd lost, everything that had been stolen, everything that could never be returned. When I finally had no tears left, we went inside together. The house looked different already. Vanessa's touches were gone. The throw pillows, the gaudy decorations, the signs that strangers had lived here. But it didn't feel like mine yet either. It felt like a museum of a life that used to exist. My phone rang. The FBI agent. I took a deep breath and answered. For the next hour, I told her everything. Every detail of the past 5 years, every manipulation, every lie, every stolen dollar and stolen moment. Agent DeMarco listened, taking notes, asking gentle questions. Mrs. Hayes, you're not her first victim, but you might be her last. Your case, combined with the others, should put Vanessa away for a long time, and your testimony will be crucial. After we hung up, Linda made tea, and we sat in my kitchen, in silence. Outside, the December darkness had fallen early, and the house felt enormous around us. What happens now? I asked finally. Linda reached across the table and took my hand. Now? Now you start putting the pieces back together. It won't be easy. It won't be fast. But you survived, Maggie. You're still here. That's something. Was it? I wasn't sure anymore. I'd survived, yes. But what was left of me? Who was Margaret Hayes now that she wasn't David's mother? Wasn't a victim? Wasn't responsible for keeping everything together? A knock at the door made us both jump. Linda went to answer it while I sat frozen, afraid it might be Vanessa somehow, back to finish what she'd started. But it was Rachel, my attorney, with more papers. I'm sorry to intrude, but I wanted to bring these by. The protective order is in place. Also, Mrs. Hayes, I did some digging. Vanessa opened 3 credit cards in your name. You'll need to file identity theft reports and freeze your credit immediately. 3 credit cards. How much debt had she left me with? How much more did I have to lose? The night stretched ahead of me. The first night in 5 years that was truly mine. I should have felt relief, liberation, victory. Instead, I felt like I was standing in the ruins of my life, surrounded by rubble, with no idea how to begin rebuilding. And somewhere across town, my son sat in a motel room, alone with the knowledge of what he'd done. What we'd both done. How we'd both let a monster into our lives and handed her everything. The question that kept echoing in my mind as I tried to sleep that night, in my own bedroom, in my own house, finally alone. What happened now? Because getting Vanessa arrested wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a much longer, harder journey. The trial happened in March. I sat in that courtroom for 3 days, watching Vanessa in her orange jumpsuit, listening as victim after victim came forward. Judge Chen's elderly parents, their voices shaking. Frank Morrison's sister, crying as she described her brother's final months. 2 other families I'd never heard of. And me. I told my story to a room full of strangers, reliving every humiliation, every manipulation. Vanessa stared at me the entire time, her face blank, emotionless. She felt nothing. She was nothing. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. 15 years minimum. I thought I'd feel something when they read the verdict. Relief, maybe. Satisfaction. But I just felt tired. David sat in the back of the courtroom every single day. I didn't acknowledge him. Couldn't. Not yet. In the months that followed, I worked with the FBI to recover what I could. The credit card debt, $43,000 in fraudulent charges, was eventually cleared. Vanessa had been thorough, but sloppy. She'd used the same playbook too many times. My retirement account was depleted but not destroyed. I sold the house in May. I couldn't live there anymore. Too many ghosts, too many memories soaked into the walls. A young couple bought it, excited about their first home. I watched them walk through the rooms where I'd been erased, and I felt nothing but relief that it would belong to someone else now. I bought a small condo in northwest Portland, near Linda. 2 bedrooms, large windows, a view of the city. I furnished it with new things Vanessa had never touched. I painted the walls bright colors, yellow in the kitchen, soft blue in the bedroom. It felt like mine in a way that house hadn't felt in years. Linda helped me reconnect with old friends. Sarah from book club, Teresa from the school where I'd taught. They welcomed me back like no time had passed, though I knew they could see the changes in me. I'd been broken and badly repaired. The cracks still showed. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping other people rebuild their lives. It gave me purpose. Reminded me I wasn't alone in surviving monsters. David kept his distance like I'd asked, but he sent letters, long ones. He'd found a therapist who specialized in manipulation and abuse. He was working at a hardware store, paying off the debts he'd accumulated. He'd enrolled in community college. He was trying. In August, almost a year after that courtroom revelation, I finally agreed to meet him for coffee. He looked different. Thinner, older, but clearer somehow, like he'd woken up from a long, terrible dream. "Thank you for seeing me," he said quietly, hands wrapped around his cup like he needed something to hold on to. We talked for 2 hours. He didn't make excuses, didn't try to explain away what had happened. He just listened as I told him how much he'd hurt me, how deeply his betrayal had cut. And he cried. Real tears, not manipulation. "I lost 5 years with you," I said. "Years we can never get back. You chose her over me, every single day." "I know," his voice broke. "I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But Mom, I want to try. If you'll let me, I want to try to be your son again. Not right away. Not until you're ready. But someday." I looked at this man who'd once been my little boy, who'd held my hand crossing streets, who'd called me when he was scared, who'd been my whole world after Robert died. Vanessa had stolen him from me as surely as she'd stolen my money and my home, but he'd also let himself be stolen. He'd made choices, even if he hadn't understood what he was choosing. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said honestly. "Not completely, not yet, maybe not ever, but I don't want to lose you forever either, so we'll take it slow. Very slow." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Whatever you need, however long it takes." We started meeting once a month, brief coffees that gradually became longer lunches. He told me about his therapy, about understanding how Vanessa had isolated him from everyone who could have helped him see the truth, how she'd made him dependent on her approval, her version of reality. He'd been a victim too, but that didn't erase what he'd done to me. In November, a year after everything fell apart, Linda threw me a birthday party at my new condo. My friends came: Sarah, Teresa, Rachel, my attorney who'd become a friend. Even Agent DeMarco stopped by with flowers. David had asked if he could come. I'd said yes. He brought me a gift, wrapped carefully. Inside was a photo album he'd made. Pictures of me and Robert, me and him as a child, our family before everything broke. The last page held a single photo, me on the day I'd moved into my new place, standing in my sunny yellow kitchen, actually smiling. "I wanted you to remember who you were," he said softly, "and who you're becoming again." I cried then, but they were different tears than before. Not just grief, but something else mixed in. Hope, maybe, possibility. As everyone sang happy birthday and I blew out 60 candles, I looked around my home at the people who'd stood by me, who'd helped me survive. And I realized something. Vanessa had taken 5 years of my life, but she hadn't taken all of me. I was still here, still standing, still capable of joy, of friendship, of rebuilding. David left early, respecting the boundaries I'd set. But before he went, he hugged me carefully, like I was fragile. "I'm proud of you, Mom, for surviving, for being stronger than all of us." After everyone left and I cleaned up the plates and wrapping paper, I stood in my living room and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Vanessa sat in a cell, probably planning her next manipulation, her next victim, but she couldn't touch me anymore. I thought about Judge Chen's words that day in court. "You're free now." He'd been right, but freedom, I'd learned, wasn't just about being released from someone else's control. It was about choosing yourself, over and over again, even when it hurt, even when it meant disappointing people you loved, even when it meant accepting that some things could never be fully repaired. My phone buzzed, a text from David. "Thank you for today. Thank you for giving me a chance to try. I love you, Mom." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I typed back, "I love you too. We'll figure this out, one day at a time." Would I ever fully trust him again? Probably not. Would our relationship ever be what it was before? No, that version of us was gone forever. But maybe we could build something new, something more honest, with better boundaries, built on the rubble of what we'd lost. I looked around my small condo, my fresh start, my second chance. It wasn't the life I'd planned. It wasn't the family I'd imagined. But it was mine. Completely, absolutely mine. And for the first time in 6 years, that was enough. I was enough. The story of how I lost everything and found myself wasn't over. It would probably never be fully over. But I'd survived the worst of it. I'd faced the monster and lived to tell about it. And in the quiet of my own home, surrounded by my own choices, I finally felt something I'd almost forgotten existed: peace.